Hello, my name is Andy Chatha. We are here at ARC Industry Leadership Forum 2026. I'm delighted to have Chris Stevens with us today. Chris is President of Automation at Siemens Digital Industries. Welcome, Chris.
Thank you.
Chris, manufacturing companies, they have lack of data. To do AI, they really need good data.
Yeah.
And they need all these edge devices. How are you helping your customers with the more gather good data and hopefully helping them also clean the data and so forth?
Okay, that's a big first question.
Yeah.
So we'll try to unpack it a little bit.
Yeah.
First and foremost, let's talk about maybe what edge is and maybe what edge isn't. I think it's important to clarify. I spent many years at Siemens in the software space. So we talked about cloud a lot. And I think when you go to some of our partners, of course, they want to talk about cloud. Well, everything can't be done in the cloud. So one simple use case I'll talk about is, let's say you have a bunch of sensors that's gathering data. If those sensors detects a defect, by the time it gets to the cloud, processes and analyzes it, you could be affected many parts. The reason why you want to introduce edge is very close to the machine. And so you said it in your question, but we're gathering lots of data at the machine, real time. So now if it detects a defect, it can turn off the machine or make an adjustment right away. And that's the difference between edge and cloud. Now, Andy, what I'll tell you is you need both. So I'm not saying it's one or the other, but when it comes to data, when it comes to real-time decisions, and what I always say is humans meet machines at the edge.
Could you talk about a little bit, what types of edge devices you are actually offering customers and helping them with?
Yeah, so for us, we call it industrial edge.
Okay.
And so basically, it's not so much about the devices, it's more about the decision making. Okay. So closely what I just talked about with the data and the sensors. However, you talked about a little bit in the last question, maybe I didn't answer it, but what we're doing on the edge is first and foremost is trying to understand what are all the assets that you have. Once we understand what are all the assets, literally just taking inventory of our assets, now then it's about contextualization. And that's what becomes extremely important when it comes to AI, is at the edge, we're creating all these different relationships with all the different motors, drives, sensors, everything that I discussed, controllers, those kind of things. So once we understand that contextualization, now you can feed large language models. And again, you could do it at the machine where you're going to get faster decision making versus talking about edge as a device. We like to say edge is about decisions, not about devices.
Right. So when we are talking to our customers, we do find definitely they talk about, the data is their biggest problem.
That's right.
The data, first of all, maybe it's not clean or it's so many different places, and just getting it all together so that they can actually really start doing, AI, applies AI solutions and so forth.
Yes.
Could you talk a little bit more about how you are helping them with all of this?
Yeah, I think, and I talked about it a little bit previously. So one of the first things, the way we get approached every single time is usually with the C-suite or the executive level. And they're very excited about what AI means to them. They'll call it AI-powered manufacturing. They know what they do in their real lives. What they really want is they want the human to walk up to a machine and the machine to be proactive and say, your yield today is 10% less than it was yesterday, and here's some suggestions on how you can change some of your set points. That's what they all want. Or they want predictive maintenance, or they want energy management, or they want these different use cases. What we always have to educate them on is the large language model isn't enough. It's about the data. And it's about the contextualization of the data. It's what I alluded to before. So you need to do that first. Once you have that, then you feed that large language model, then you can get the benefits that you talk about. So that's not an easy task. In many cases, like you talked about, people have millions and trillions of data points that they're collecting.
Right.
Well, the stat that I just read on the way here is 80% of manufacturers do not use their data. 80% of their data is not being used.
Yeah.
I think that's a staggering stat. That's just, we need more than that. What we need is insight, and what they're collecting is data. Right. So we can help them with the contextualization of the data. Now what's key is what we have to realize is large language models, algorithms, they can go out of date very quickly. What's critical is this idea of a learning loop. So and this is where humans become extremely important, and the scale humans in the plants. We talk about work shortages. Right. I like to talk more about how we're leveraging workforce. And the way we want to do that is we want to bring them in the loop. Because these large language models, until you continuously teach them or have this learning loop in the equation, so I make a suggestion, was that good, was that not good, just simply from a binary standpoint, but you have to have this learning loop. So you constantly want to feed this language model data. Right. Data from other sources, from your ecosystem or other sources within your plant, depending on your use case, but also data from the human to say, yes, it's good, or no, it's not. And that's when you'll start seeing benefits at scale when it comes to AI.
Customers tell us their second biggest issue right now is, all these baby boomers that are retiring, and they really have a challenge finding more AI kind of literate workforce.
Yes.
How is Siemens helping them with this issue?
Yeah. So this is key with any technology. Take AI out of the equation for just a minute, and we'll come back to that. Organizational change management is critical with any technology. Technology doesn't fail because it doesn't work. Technology fails because you don't have buy-in, either at the executive level, at the director level, at the supervisor level, or at the operator level. So what's critical as we kind of work through all the different levels is we constantly tell them the benefit of what we're doing, why we're doing it, what is the vision, what is the North Star that we're going after, and then we include them often. Now where AI comes in is you can introduce the technology early and often. And so what you want to, the worst thing you could do is come up with theory, come up with a vision, go away, and in the software world you would go away for maybe months, and then you would come back with a solution. With AI, it's much more of an agile approach. Because the technology moves much faster, you can put the technology back in front of the user very quickly. So you could say, is this what you were looking for? Is this what you wanted? Right. You can make it all about Copilot. Is this helping you? Is this not helping you? You can go back, tweak the model, come back. Is this what you meant? Yes, that's what you meant. Right. So it's this constant continuous improvement with the user in mind. And because, again, developing AI and AI applications and use cases are so much faster, that constant learning loop between the human and the user eventually and the technology person trying to deploy it becomes extremely critical. And then organizational change management becomes easier because you're constantly having that feedback loop.
Yes.
And they feel like they're a part of the decision.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. That's critical. I think you got to work as a partner with the customer and have them involved, with building these solutions and so forth. You're working with so many customers and so forth. Yeah. I'm sure you are learning from every experience as you are working with these customers. How are you actually, planning to, even improve upon what you have been working with customers going forward?
Yeah, it's a really good question. I would say this is one of those, and again, we'll go back to the hottest topic that everyone wants to talk about. This is one of those technologies that transcends industries. So what's interesting is it's a true horizontal, and the fact that, so I'll give you an example. 3 weeks ago, I was at a CPG company, and we were doing what I talked about, which we started with a few use cases. We tried to understand what is the data that we needed to support those use cases. We went out, we addressed those needs from a data perspective. We actually added some sensors and some things to help collect more data. We created those relationships and that contextualization, and then we started with one use case, then we added another, then we added another, then another. The next day, I went to an asphalt and concrete company, right? Completely different industry, completely different customers, same challenge. What we talked about was I have all this data, but I have no insight. Identical discussion. So then again, what we talked about is kind of the ugly piece, which is you got to go clean this up before you can get all the benefits from the different use cases, but we had an identical conversation. 4 weeks prior, I was at a pharmaceutical company, exact same conversation. So it's one of these technologies that transcend all different industries, and our learnings also moves from industry to industry. So that's a very exciting place to be. This is moving so fast, the technology is moving so fast. We're learning almost as we go in some cases, but we're also applying those lessons learned from the next to the next. I just talked about in less than 12 hours, some of the things we learned about at the CPG company, we applied the next day to an asphalt concrete company. So we're doing that as fast as possible. As you know, the technology is changing and it's evolving, but it's I think it's our responsibility to make sure we get those lessons learned in the hands of our customers as fast as possible across industry.
You know, Siemens has also launched an industrial co-pilot from and so forth. Could you actually tell a little bit about that? You know, how your customers are applying that and so forth?
Yeah, I'll talk a little bit about the engineering co-pilot. So where we went first is one of every 3 machines has a Siemens controller globally. And so one of the areas we felt we could address and provide a lot of value quickly to our customers is the ability to write code. So in the control layer. So one of the first co-pilots we came out with is engineering co-pilot. And so that is the ability to, as set points changes, as boundary conditions changes, as maybe cycle times or other areas change, we can work with co-pilot, update the control logic that goes along with that PLC. Again, you want a human in a loop, right? So you want to be able to say, okay, these were the changes that were made. Does this look right? We have what we call a digital twin. It was talked about today. I know PepsiCo did a fabulous job outlining the value of digital twin. You validate that against a digital twin, what we call virtual commissioning. If it validates in a virtual world, then you apply that to the physical world. So that's a good example of how we're applying engineering co-pilot to the real world.
Yeah, you're totally correct. Actually, PepsiCo presentation was fabulous this morning, and I think the audience really enjoyed it. As we are advising customers, you know, AI is changing so fast that you got to work with trusted partners.
That's right.
And so forth. And could you talk a little bit more about actually how you are taking your partnerships to the customers?
Yeah. The only way this is going to work at scale is the ecosystems and partners. We already talked about data. Data doesn't just come from our controllers, like I talked about, doesn't just come from our PLM systems on the engineering side. It comes from a variety of places. Like I talked about sensors, other control layers. It talks about other enterprise systems. These are all valuable pieces of information that we need to focus and feed this large language model. You also need processors. You're going to need speed. And so we're working with, we talked about Copilot, working with the Microsofts of the world, we're working with AWS on an edge to cloud capability. How fast can we move data from edge to cloud? I talked about that a little bit earlier. That's critical. NVIDIA was on stage with us at CES with our CEO. Jensen was on stage. They talked about the value of their partnerships. We're helping them with simulation models, how to build their products. They're in turn giving us their product to use. And leverage inside of our organization to make things faster and process speed faster. And then in return, we're going to customers together, like Foxconn is what they talked about on stage, and how we're leveraging that partnership to help Foxconn build data centers faster. And ultimately, everybody needs data centers because data centers is what make it AI go, and you need that speed and productivity from that. So that's the definition of a true partnership when you start showing that full ecosystem, and everybody brings something a little bit different to the table. But I like to say that the best definition of an ecosystem is you provide more than you take out. And what I just described is exactly what we're seeing with our partnerships, whether it's AWS, whether it's Microsoft, whether it's, I always look at our customers as partners. We have our solution providers when they go to implement some of our technology, at some of the end users that I talk about, that I discussed, that I was at 3 weeks ago, pharma companies, CPG companies. So we will not get there without leveraging this ecosystem. And I think everyone needs to be open to that. And if you're not open to that, then you won't scale at the speed that we can scale. And if we're going to make manufacturing and reinvent the United States and the Americas, and which is what we're doing, we're not reshoring, we're reinventing, in my opinion, then we need those ecosystems to work together to continue to make manufacturing here in America much better.
Totally agree with you, Chris. I watched Siemens, the CEO, on the stage with obviously NVIDIA and PepsiCo. And thank you so much for sharing these insights with our audience. We have been speaking with Chris Stevens, President of Automation at Siemens Digital Industries. Thank you for watching.